In 1939, Gardner Fox had an idea that he pitched to Harry Lampert for a superhero inspired by the Roman god Mercury and who would be blessed with the powers of super speed. Little did they know that their creation would become the template for all future speedsters and that an iconic Golden Age hero was about to be born. In this episode of Tony's Comic Spotlight, we shine the spotlight on the first appearance of Jay Garrick, the Golden Age Flash, in Flash Comics number 1 from 1940. Story number 1: The Origin of the Flash. At Midwestern University in the late 1930s, a student was involved in a laboratory accident and inhaled some hard water gas fumes, which put him in a coma for 2 weeks. Jay Garrick made a complete recovery and soon was back on the school's football team. A weird after effect of the fumes was that Jay could think and act at tremendous speeds. He soon graduated from college and moved to New York City to become an assistant professor at Coleman University. In New York, at age 21, Garrick adopted a secret identity as the Flash and embarked on a superheroic career, starting with the dismantling of a local protection racket. Jay's college sweetheart, Joan Williams, visits Jay and enlists his help in locating her missing father, Major Williams, who has been kidnapped by Satan and the rest of the Faultless Four, a group of scientists working for a foreign power that are seeking the plans for the secret new atomic bombardier. Flash rescues the Major from the spies, who then fight back and make a distraction by sending an aircraft to strafe a nearby beach. This murderous tactic backfires on them when the Flash simply follows the fuel-depleted plane back to the side of the gang's new hideout, which he immediately invades. To save his own skin, Satan electrocutes all 3 of his partners, then flees in a car. In a stupid attempt to bump the Flash off the road, Satan loses control of his car and plummets to his doom. Story number 2: Cliff Cornwall in The Disappearing Plane. The U.S. Army calls an FBI agent Cliff Cornwall because they have lost contact with a fleet of U.S. bombers in Alaska. He is sent alone with a special plane in search of the fleet. Arriving in Alaskan airspace, he is attacked by a black plane and forced to land. On the ground, he is accosted by a woman with a gun, who at first mistakes him for one of the black plane pilots. These black planes have been destroying or capturing all the U.S. planes in Alaska and their bases up on a mountain nearby. So Cornwall and the woman, Lots Valaire, survey the area from the air and find an airplane graveyard along with a hidden base within the mountain with a hangar as an entrance. Cliff and the woman blow up the hangar, trapping the enemy pilots within, and they call the U.S. Army to arrest them. Story number 3: The Origin of Hawkman. Weapons collector and research scientist Carter Hall receives an Egyptian dagger from his friend, Professor Jim Rock. Touching the dagger causes Hall to relive his former life as Prince Khufu, ancient Egypt. Long ago, Khufu and his love, Shiera, were both killed with this dagger by Khufu's longtime enemy, Hathset. At the moment of his death, Khufu promised to be reincarnated in order to avenge his own murder. In modern New York City, Carter awakens from the experience with knowledge of his previous unknown life. Soon after this, he meets Shiera for the first time as she's fleeing a deadly electrical accident in the New York City subway. Shiera, too, has been plagued by dreams of her previous life. Carter then fashions wings and a belt of nth metal, an anti-gravity material with special properties. He also dons a hawk-shaped headpiece to appear as the hawk god Anubis, in which he dubs himself Hawkman. He sets out to find the source of the subway disturbance. Armed with a quarterstaff, Hawk soon locates and invades the laboratory of Dr. Hastur, electrician extraordinaire. Hall realizes that Hastur is the reincarnation of his ancient foe, Hathset, and smashes some of his equipment, while Hastur hastily escapes. Hawkman then flies back to Rebel Road and finds Shiera missing, rearms himself with a crossbow and a nth metal cloak, then flies back to Hastur's estate. Meanwhile, Hastur has used a strange hypnosis to telepathically summon Shiera in order to use her against Hawkman. The winged hero returns to the villain's lair, finding Shiera already queued up on a sacrificial altar, and throws a protective sheet of nth metal over Shiera to protect her. Then shoots Hastur with a crossbow. Hastur's laboratory and estate are destroyed when he falls against his own dynamo, causing it to run wild, setting the stones of the place on fire. Hastur appears to die and the laboratory is destroyed. Finally, Hawkman returns Shiera to her home. Story number 4: Johnny Thunder in The Kidnapping of Johnny Thunder. 1-year-old Johnny Thunder, son of Simon B. Thunder, is kidnapped by agents of Boadicea, working for the priest of Assyria. Johnny was born at 7 a.m. on July 7, 1917, and according to Boadician legend, will inherit great powers on his 7th birthday. In an elaborate ceremony in the Temple of the Seven Great Gates, Johnny is given a magical belt called the Eternal Zone of the Zodiac, and a ceremony is performed with the mystical word Sayu, which in English sounds like Sayu. When he is 5, through an unlikely series of accidents, Johnny escapes from Boadicea and is returned home by an American freighter. Then, through another unlikely set of events, is reunited with his family. Starting on his 7th birthday, torrential rains last for 7 days, all over the world, but the Thunder home is spared. The Boadician cultists search for Johnny, but they cannot locate him until he is 23 years old. Johnny gains employment as a window washer, and during the accident says the word Sayu. An invisible magic thunderbolt appears and answers Johnny's wishes, although Johnny is unaware of its intervention. The Boadicians attempt to kidnap Johnny again, but the thunderbolt rescues him. Johnny, however, loses his job. Story number 5, Flash Picture Novelette, The Demon Dummy, Part 1 of 2. Ventriloquist Harry Dunstan was engaged to Madge DeVere, but his rival for her affections was Jim Devlin. A corrupt private detective, Devlin framed Dunstan for manslaughter, and the ventriloquist was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was permitted to bring his dummy Red along with him. In prison, the dummy seemingly took on a life of his own, giving voice to all of Dunstan's darkest thoughts. When it came to Jim Devlin, his thoughts were dark indeed. Jim Devlin had married Madge, who later died in childbirth. Eventually, Devlin's crime, for which he had framed Harry Dunstan, was solved correctly. Devlin was in prison, and Dunstan was released, but this brought him no joy. Madge was dead, and his imprisoned enemy was safe from his revenge. To be continued. Story number 6, Origin of the Whip. Bored and wealthy playboy Rod Gaynor decides to travel across America with his assistant Wing. His travels bring him to Seguro in the American Southwest, where he meets Marissa Dillon, the daughter of a newspaper publisher. Marissa is concerned for the poor laborers who are being mistreated by the law. Intrigued by Marissa and wanting to help the poor, Gaynor is inspired by the legend of Don Fernando Suarez, a rich man who took the secret identity of El Castigo, the Whip, to fight against wealthy landowners in the 19th century. Gaynor puts the legend to work for him and becomes a new incarnation of the Whip. For his first act, he frees Carlos, a wrongly imprisoned worker, and defeats the corrupt town sheriff. Here's some trivia I found in regards to Flash Comics number 1 and the creation of the Jay Garrick version of the Flash. I hope you like it. Jay Garrick got super speed from smoking. The opening story in Flash Comics number 1 introduced readers to Jay as a college football player and a science student working late into the night on his big project, studying the gases generated by hard water. Jay decided to pep himself up with a smoke break. Leaning against the lab table, he accidentally knocked his experiment onto the floor, inhaled the hard water fumes, and passed out. He woke up a week later as the fastest man alive. A doctor explained that hard water naturally speeds up reflexes. Jay's just sped up more than most. However unlikely, though. Hard water is just water with a high mineral content. It doesn't take advanced research to analyze it, and breathing hard water vapors is less likely to speed you up than a few cups of coffee. Even by Golden Age standards, it's not a great origin, but once Jay had his speed, who cared? A later retcon would explain the vapor triggered his metagene, the strand of DNA that turns freak accidents into secret origins. People don't see Jay's face even though he doesn't sport a mask. When he first became fast, he made no attempt to hide his powers. His doctors knew about him, both football teams knew about him, and in Flash Comics number 3, everyone knows his identity. But secret identities and superheroes go hand in hand, so before long, Jay being the Flash was a secret to everyone but Joan. Even Jay's science professor, who later became a costume criminal, didn't put it together. It might be hard to imagine Flash's identity ever being secret with his face on display, but Jay's powers included more than running fast. Writers eventually established that Jay maintained a constant super fast vibration, even when standing still. While his face looks normal to readers, that's not how it appears to other comic book characters. Someone could look right at him and all they'd see is a blur. The second Flash, Barry Allen, used a similar trick in Flash number 218 to hide his identity when he was unmasked. Barry Allen grew up reading about Jay Garrick in comic books. Barry Allen, the second Flash, was a ginormous comics nerd. The first time readers saw Barry, he was reading about Jay in Flash Comics number 13, something unusual in an age when comics were strictly kid stuff. A few moments later, a lightning bolt struck the lab and toppled a rack of chemicals onto Barry. When he discovered the accident had charged him with super speed, he assumed the name of his favorite superhero, the Flash. When DC finally brought back Jay in Flash number 123, the explanation was that Barry and Jay existed on parallel worlds, later named Earth 1 and Earth 2. The Earth 1 Gardner Fox, the name of the real world Flash comics writer, was psychically plugged into Earth 2. What he thought was his own stories were actually events from Jay's life. A later Flash story established that writers in the real world, Earth Prime and DC's multiverse, got their ideas the same way. After the Golden Age ended, Jay retired for a decade. These days, it seems just unthinkable for a superhero to quit unless they're physically incapacitated or dead. But at the end of the Golden Age, Jay and his fellow JSAers hung up their hats, married, and settled into everyday lives. Jay's final adventure was the Justice Society's Final Case, 1951's All-Star Comics number 57, after which he and Joan tied the knot. Years later, writer Paul Levis decided that wasn't a good enough reason for the team to quit. In Adventure Comics 466, readers learned that Justice Society had been caught up in the anti-communist witch hunts of the 1950s. A congressional committee demanded the JSA reveal their identities to prove they're patriotic Americans behind those masks. Instead, the Flash and the other heroes retired with their secrets intact. The Flash's deadliest enemy was a lawyer. No, Clifford the Thinker DeVoe never tried to sue the Flash. His career as a rising star in a Keystone City's DA's office was over before Flash came along. A mobster, Hunk Norvik's dirty tactics ruined DeVoe's supposedly airtight case against him. DeVoe threw in the towel, figuring the good guys couldn't win. He convinced Norvok to put him on retainer. If the mob boss had an insoluble problem, the brainy attorney would think of a way out. Eventually, DeVoe eliminated his employer and took over the mob. All that remained to secure his power was to take out Keystone's new hero, the Flash. DeVoe thought that would be easy. After all, the Scarlet Speedster couldn't possibly be as fast as people claimed, could he? After getting out of jail, the Thinker came back for several more battles with Jay, in addition to battling the JSA as part of the Injustice Society. In the Silver Age, he used a thinking cap to give himself psionic powers, making him a tougher foe. Old age eventually sent DeVoe to his grave, but his fine mind survived as a computer intelligence, thinking up new ways to give Keystone City and Wally West Flash some grief. The Flash became so popular that the Justice Society dropped him. Flash's popularity brought him his own comic book, but it also got him retired from the Justice Society. In the 1940s, the JSA series was seen as a good way to promote second stringers who didn't have their own comic books. When the Justice Society began its adventures in 1940, that included Flash and Green Lantern, along with Dr. Fate, the Spectre, the Sandman, the Atom, Hawkman, and Hourman. A year and a half later, Flash had his own book, so the JSA relegated him to honorary status in All-Star number 6. He made a couple of cameo appearances after that, but he didn't play a major role in an adventure until issue number 25. The All-Star Companion suggests internal DC politics led to Starman and Spectre getting yanked from the team, so bringing Flash and Green Lantern, another honorary member with his own book, back into action helped fill out the roster. Flash continued with the team until the collapse of the superhero boom turned All-Star Comics into All-Star Western. The story that brought Jay back was written in response to an artist challenge. For Silver Age Flash editor Julia Schwartz, the seed for a good story was a good cover. Come up with a striking cover image, then shape a story to fit it. Flash artist Carmen Infantino has told interviewers he liked to torment Schwartz by drawing cover images Julie and his writers couldn't possibly turn into a story, one of which was a cover with Barry Allen's Flash and Jay's Flash, both rushing to save a man. I created the cover with the two Flashes, figuring there was no way he could create a story around that. After all, how can they use Jay if he was a comic book character and Barry was the Flash? To Infantino's surprise, no sooner had he returned home than Schwartz called to say he and Fox had figured it out, though not easily. The second episode of Season 2's Flash from the CW pays tribute to the story, both by reusing the title Flash of Two Worlds and by replicating the cover scene. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to watch this spotlight as we took a look at the Golden Age Flash Jay Garrick. If you're enjoying the videos, please like and subscribe. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to watch any of my videos. It really is appreciated. And until next time, I'll see you later. Thank you and God bless.